Andrew, GMs and scouts have already said that Michael Sam will drop in the draft after this announcement. What do you think teams are worried about?
Yeah, I mean, there's some of that out there, Maggie. There's other people saying, yeah, they support him and courageous. I think it's interesting. Roger Goodell, speaking for the league in general, was very supportive. Of course, he's been public. He has a gay brother. And it's easy for the league to be very tolerant, and I think they will continue to be. The real issue is not the league. The league doesn't draft Michael Sam. It's the teams. And I think what you mentioned is really, listen, I think we're past homophobia. I don't think that's the issue here. I think the issue, and maybe what you're referring to, is this, for lack of a better word, distraction. Wherever he goes, there's going to be local and national media that want the story. When he goes to a city to play against another team, they're going to request 3 or 4 players, the star quarterback, this player, and of course him. It's always going to be an issue going forward with him, and that, again, through no intent of his own, is going to inflict what I call maintenance on a player that's not going to be a top-level player on the team. So I think when you hear about GMs worried about this and maybe it drops him in the draft, it's not about homophobia. It's about this whole distraction thing. It's not, listen, I don't defend that for a minute. Teams tolerate DUI, sexual assault, domestic violence, but they have a concern about someone that's maintenance. Teams want these guys to be in their silent cocoon and not come out in terms of a attention grabbing. And through no fault of his own, this will be an attention grabber. So I think if there's going to be a form of bias, Maggie, it's not going to be, again, homophobic. It's going to be distraction bias. There's sort of the Tim Tebow concept where you can get a similar player without the stuff that goes along with it.
But Andrew, you mentioned Tim Tebow, which is interesting.
Yeah.
You know, he was signed last summer by a franchise that despises distractions. And I mean, what exactly is a distraction in an NFL clubhouse, in an NFL front office? I think that's what a lot of people struggle with is, I mean, Richard Sherman during the Super Bowl, the biggest week of the year, that could qualify as a distraction. A team goes out and they play their best game of the season, a historic game. What exactly is a locker room distraction?
Yeah, it's hard to define, Chris. I think what we're talking about here is a talent equation to go along with it. I mean, you mentioned Jason Collins. We broke that story. Jason Collins is unsigned. Is he good enough to be on an NBA roster? Of course he is. Are there players of similar talent playing in roles that he could play? Yes, there are. Is it due to him being homosexual? Probably not. Is it due to him being a story if they sign him for a backup role player? Perhaps. I think Tim Tebow is good enough to be a developmental quarterback on almost every team, a third-string quarterback. But for the talent level, for that position, which is always a faceless, nameless, anonymous position, why do it? And I think that's what teams are talking about. If you're a special player like a Richard Sherman, teams will put up with that. If that name was not Richard Sherman but some fourth cornerback or a third-string player, I think there's a different equation. I think you always have to look at talent. And the greater the talent, the more teams will put up with what I call maintenance. But they don't like it. Generally, they expect it from their star quarterback. They expect it from a couple star players. They don't expect it from down-the-line roster guys.
Andrew, someone asked me this morning. You're better positioned than I am to answer it. Is it possible that for however many teams might be turned off by a potential distraction, there are other teams that might be interested? This is a chance to make a real statement?
Yeah, and I think the higher the level, John, the more interest there is. We saw the top level, the most important person in the NFL, Roger Goodell, be very supportive. I think there was a statement by Steve Tisch. I think there are going to be other statements from high levels of ownership. Whether they influence decision makers is another thing. Listen, it is easy to be publicly supportive right now, and I think a lot of people are. I don't care about that. In terms of looking whether Michael Sam's going to be drafted in the 2nd, 3rd, 5th round or not drafted, what is going on behind closed doors in those draft rooms, and is a decision maker saying, you know, if we get to the 3rd or 4th round, we got 3 or 4 defensive ends, we're going to take the one that's not named Michael Sam because we get the same player without the other stuff. That's what I worry about, this sort of subtle discrimination against what he brings in the bigger picture.
Andrew, for the idea, though, that a NFL locker room is not ready to accept an openly gay teammate, do you agree with that?
Uh, I think I don't agree with that. I think listen, maybe there's a couple knuckleheads in each locker room that may make some jokes. I think one thing people don't know about locker rooms that maybe they don't know as well as they should, it's not kumbaya. I mean, these are positional groups, pockets of players throughout the locker room. You have defensive linemen on one corner, offensive linemen. I mean, there are offensive linemen that probably have not said 10 words to some defensive backs in locker rooms. The key people around are going to be that D-line group. And I think they're going to accept him. And once they do, that becomes a buffer for the rest of the team. There's 10 or 12 defensive linemen, and probably 15 going into camp. How are they going to get along? And I think he'll assimilate into that group. I think this sort of locker room phobia is overstated. It's 2014. And again, these people are young. You know, I tell my teenage sons about this, they shrug, like, why is that news? So I think the younger the generation, the less of a big deal this is.
Yeah, with the average age in an NFL locker room just about 26 years old. So closer to Michael Sam than a lot of the people who are in the front office and making these decisions. Andrew Brandt, our sports business analyst, thank you for the time today. We appreciate it.
You got it, Maggie.
Hey everyone, I hope you enjoyed this clip from our daily live show, SI Now. You can find a link to the complete episode in the description box below. And while you're there, make sure to subscribe to Sports Illustrated's YouTube channel. Remember, you can watch SI Now Monday through Friday live at 1 p.m. Eastern Time only on SI.com. We'll see you there.